And welcome back to game 3 from Kegworth 2025, as the surprisingly competent Berbers seem to have crept up the table into one of the 2 wins out of 2. Can't really knock it. And the reward for that was a battle against Paul Johnson with the Prussians and Estonians. Now, I'd used a Prussian and Estonian allied list as an ally to a medieval Scandinavian at a recent competition you may have seen or read on the website. So I knew kind of it was going to be some punchy foot, but I wasn't quite sure how it would all fit together. It's a very rarely seen list. So without further ado, let's have a look at how it was actually put together by Paul. So here is the list, and I guess maybe the best place to start is in the middle, where there's a huge block of feudal Polish ally with 6 knights and 3 light infantry to kind of cover them or screen them. 3 of those knights are elite. Slightly surprisingly, is not included, so I guess they can, in theory, split up, and it's competent. And then you've got 2, I think they are almost exactly identical lists here. So 4 medium swordsmen impetuous, great against spearmen and infantry and bowmen, especially when it's screened by 4 light foot as well. So you've got a block 4 wide that's sort of archery proof, that can run at people or hide in terrain. 1 knight, which is impetuous. This is I guess it slightly mirrors on a much smaller scale my own theory with the Berber army of having a reserve of knights to counteract anything that looks dangerous to the infantry, and a light cavalry javelin just to kind of dick about as well. And if you look at the other command, it's pretty much exactly the same, apart from the fact 2 of the medium impetuous swordsmen are nobility, making them elite, making them even more punchy. So you've got 4 wide anti-infantry thing with a knight to protect them. You've got a 4 wide anti-infantry thing with a knight to protect them, and then you've got 6 knights in the middle. So you actually stack up to a pretty impressive 8 knights there, if you so wish. Command and control's patchy, to say the least. Again, it might be one of those lists that you look at and think, in retrospect, should this be a +2 command list? But maybe not. But it's still very, very unusual, and a lot would sort of depend on the terrain and the matchup, I think, in this game. So here we go. This looks like, again, it may be me in mountains too. That's one of my forests. That's a mountain. But actually, that's a piece of rough terrain that I do tend to put down. I think I've probably got caught between whether I want this to be open or closed, really, not really knowing what was in it. But this big irritating forest sits in the middle of Paul's deployment zone, really splits his army. I'm never quite sure whether that's a good thing to do or not. There must be more constructive ways to use terrain than just buggering up your opponent, but if that's where it falls, that's where it falls. So I've done much the same as usual. Knights in the middle, they're sort of facing this forest. They're clearly not going to go into it, but on the assumption not much is going to come through it, or anything that did come through it would be easy pickings to the knights. So they can go this way, they can go that way, they can gang up on somebody. There's some rough terrain here, which should be a good home for my bowmen and javelin men. The Almugavars should be okay. That was my theory against the impetuous troops. The spearmen can sort of tough it out, and this bit is a little bit refused with this much smaller command over here. Now, I'd not really expected the poles, and there the poles are in 2 blocks actually. They're split either side of this forest, so you've got 3 poles there plus the reserve knight. There's the reserve knight plus 3 poles, and 2 big blocks of infantry. So this block of infantry is really dangerous against anything here. This big block of infantry is pretty dangerous against most of this, and I've only really got 3 knights to counter either of those. But those knights are pretty much going to be dealing with 6 poles, so that's kind of tricky. Can I get my spearmen in front of the Polish knights? If I get the spearmen in front of the Polish knights, it leaves this 2 Almugavars and the crossbowmen pretty undergunned to deal with them. If I get the spearmen all the way over there, I'm even thinner against these 3 poles. Do these 3 neutralize 3? Who knows? Then that leaves these 6 against this, which my cavalry are maybe better. My spearmen are probably so-so. The bowmen are much worse. Interesting matchup, interesting army, particularly as they're attacking on desert terrain with winter basing. So here we go. We've got everybody coming forward, the poles coming forward, the spearmen coming forward. My army is still not yet to move. or barely ready to move, just moving forwards in a big long line to attack. Clearly they're going for my knights, they're going for my infantry. Not quite sure what I actually do about that. And over on the other side, there's a bit of messing about. The spearmen are making a run for my infantry, and the spare knight has, I guess, come up to act as a screen to try and keep this lot legal. The Poles here are yet to move, but they're making a beeline for my spearmen. See how they do against that, as that sort of starts to come forwards. And unfortunately, I've saved a few points, making my life much more interesting by having these 3 knights as unreliable. So they are unreliable. They've rolled a 1 in their first command pit. That means they're just stuck. They can't do anything until the enemy gets within 4 of them, or they roll a 6, and that just completely becalms my army. So all I've done is these guys are just sort of sitting there. I can't use these to defend them. They just become a huge target now. What I've done here is I pushed this line slightly forward. This is a separate combat, really. This is almost a separate battle. These knights are going to end up fighting these Poles, I think, and it's really, is there going to be enough to overwhelm them? This lot are just going to have to get far forward and see with what they deal with. I've dragged a cavalryman over here to try and interfere with the free assault of these Polish knights as well. So you can see here over on this side, getting my shooters into this rough terrain, hopefully neutralize this knight and the light horse. A few more light horse here, so that's not maybe not quite enough to defend the end of these guys, put some threat on them, but they seem quite happy sailing towards 2 spearmen and 2 Almugavars. And if I can get this guy up, he's an extra bit of reserve. They've still yet to move. So what happens, they've straightened up. They're just happy to go in at anybody, really. I've shoved a cavalryman in the line. Cavalry are much better against these guys than most things. Gives me a bit more width as well. Those Poles are starting to come up as well. I've moved the spearmen up just to give me a bit more width, maybe draw off some of those Poles here. And we're starting to try and shoot, but this skirmish screen is still tough to do. And I'm working on the assumption that these impact Almugavars will just neutralize and be better than the furious charge of these hairy barbarian infantry. Over on this side, still nothing's happened. These guys are still unreliable. This lot are advancing cautiously, I guess, getting ready to be in triggering range and sorting themselves out and then rush forward. I just can't go forwards with this. I just end up being overwhelmed. So it's just sitting, waiting like a target, really, painted on the head. And bosh, they're off, finally. The Christian knights are off and running. It's kind of a bit scary. I push my cavalry there forwards to try and go into the end of these medium foot, leaving this target bit back. And I can't really, going into a 3-on-3 combat with empty flanks would be terrible. So I've split one of the knights off. He's going to just puncture or try and punch these. So hope they do all right. Hope he does all right. 2 against 3 isn't great odds, but if I can get that into these squishy things, they could do some bowling ball style damage onto them. Let's see how that goes. And but this was the point at which Paul, the other Paul, interrupted us yet again, just to tell us. And we could see that myself and Paul Johnson were going to definitely fight it out, and there was going to be a victory either way. So we humoured him yet again, and he was telling us this time about the legendary band, or legendary band in his mind, another heavy metal medieval themed band, and this is Dragon's Sack, or Dragon Sack, and this again another tour poster, I think, for one of their tours, named after their album Gold Glory and Groin Injuries, which it fits with the theme. Let's say that you've got the dragon playing heavy metal guitar, flying over the medieval village. It's all the imagery you could possibly want, really. So let's just tell you a bit more about Dragon's Sack. So Dragon Sack were formed in Montana on a farm, or a farmstead, I think, back sometime in the early 1970s. But they achieved notoriety after they all moved to Chicago and released the album Flameproof Underwear, which was produced in a sort of particularly leathery, unpleasant vinyl, but more importantly had an actual scorch mark printed onto every sleeve, ticking the flameproof side of it. Luckily, they didn't attach underwear to every sleeve. That would have been something else. And their main albums, as we've seen, Gold Glory and Groin Injuries being the best one by all accounts, or so Paul told me. He also had on his iPod burn the village, save the ale, and then, as we've talked about already, Flameproof Underwear, their opening album, where their sound is still a little bit rough and ready, as opposed to now, in which their sound is just probably pretty rough, to be honest. The key factor against them, which if you look on their Wikipedia page, you can see their lead guitarist Smulders McGirth once tried to set his guitar on fire mid-solo, but accidentally ignited his hair instead. And it was at least 7 years later before he admitted that it wasn't simply part of the act. So anyway, let's have a bit of Dragon Sack. So look, we're back. Dragon Sack's been done and dusted, and we're seeing what's going on. Something's clearly been going on in the meantime. So what has happened here over on my left, the knight and the light horse has come up to sort of put pressure on my wing. I've not done any shooting damage really there. It looks like I might have killed one Lightfoot there. The three crazy infantry are just rushing forwards, and you know, this isn't great, but I've got an overlap. At least I've got these guys here. The cavalrymen can go in their flank if need be. I've shoved all these spearmen up just to neutralize one of the Polish knights and the other guy. So this isn't great, but my plan is really to take it on the chin. And I'm thinking that these guys, being elite, should hopefully be better with overlaps and things. These guys are a bit squishy, a bit tricky here, but it's not too bad. And again, these Poles look like they're a bit out of control. So I've shoved them up just to try and draw them in, stop them getting involved in the fight against my herring off into sort of the randomness knights going in there. This is just really bracing for impact and hoping that it all goes okay. And over on the other side, the Poles and the knights have not quite got to grips with each other. They've just got straight through this gap that I couldn't really fill because these started a turn or two too late to be fighting over here. They've gone straight into the spearmen and the bowmen, which is not ideal. The knight has managed to get himself into play with another one against my my cavalry, who are taking a bit of a kicking, but you know, they're holding their own against that knight. Let's see how this all pans out, and as there's more kind of reserves coming in. So battle is joined. Let's really see what happens here. And over on the other side, battle is joined at exactly the same time as well. Everybody's in combat. I think it might be, just looking here, that this might be the only unit I've got that's not really battle unit I've got that's not really involved in combat. They're an overlap, they're fighting, they're an overlap, they're fighting. Sheer weight of numbers, the Lightfoot coming back to provide overlaps, the Poles going into my Christian armoured spearmen there as well. So a lot of dice are about to get rolled, and a lot of decisions are going to get made quite quickly. As these guys just, you know, here they are, you can see their nasty little faces lurking out of the woods as they all pile forwards, ready on this snowy base to kind of see what happens when they take on the North Africans. And this is what happens really. I got the factors wrong with Almogavars. Medium swordsmen cancel the impact of impetuous swordsmen who charge them, which is, you know, the normal thing. But actually Almogavars are spearmen, even though they've got impact. So I didn't cancel that. So I was actually 2-all and just got completely swept away there. These guys have toughed it out. My bowmen have taken a couple of hits. The knight has gone through against my light horse, unsurprisingly. Even the enemy light horse are beating mine up. That's not gone particularly well. This is yeah, only the javelinmen here to try and rescue it, but they're gone as well quite soon. My line hasn't really fared as well as it's supposed to there. Here, almost even worse. The Poles go straight through my knights at first contact. They beat up the other knights as well. I haven't really won anything of note in these fairly evens odds combats. Just come out the wrong side of that one. And over here, unsurprisingly, the warband goes straight through my bowmen. They have battered my spearmen as well, giving them a couple of hits. They're still beating up my medium cavalry, but this thing isn't going to end well either. These guys can now attack here. These guys will soon destroy those and be able to go here. just standing and waiting to be hit by something that wants to come forward and hit you isn't great. Slightly more sort of drawn out picture of it, but yeah, you can just see it's bits and bobs, and this big hole in the middle of my line that is suddenly going to be there. These poles are going to get into the flank of my general as well pretty soon. Over here, I'm in desperation really. You know, my bowman is going into the flank of a knight. That's real fighting stuff. They've just gone straight through the spearman there as well. That's a 2-hit marker that doesn't really fit. These guys are just trying to get out the way, put themselves in a position to support when these turn onto the flank of my Omugavars. Looks like my spearmen are kind of doing okay, but that's about it. But this was, in theory, a kind of good line to receive these guys. But you know, there's 1, 2, 3 of them left, and I've got some big holes that have appeared there. Here, a bit more stuff swept away. Yep, my spearmen are gone. My knights are still fighting on. They're giving a little bit back. The cavalry have sort of gone through one, but the knights in here as well. But this is, you know, I've just stood and been punched in the face. The knights turn round. My desperate bowmen are suddenly overlapped on 2 sides and crushed. That guy's turned into my Almugavars. These guys are still fighting away, but that was it. That was just the end of it. It was basically standing there being punched in the face by something designed to punch you in the face if you're just standing there. And you know, the unreliability of the 3 knights was pretty much a force multiplier for what was just a bad matchup and some bad combat dice anyway. So that does see me kind of slipping slightly further, you know, not too far much further down in this not quite proper order, and fighting another later Byzantine in the next game against Robin.
This means war.